I really just want to know what the fascination with Batman is about. I mean, I've noticed that only in cartoons and comics, that's typically where Batman shines at. Sorry for the dog in the background, I just gotta deal with it. But Batman usually shines in the comics and the cartoons. Those are the only things that typically follow the Batman genre. Those are the only ways you're gonna see a full-fledged Batman. I think I have a real hard time believing that any of the Batman that's been on the big screen in live action can take out any of the Justice League. I feel like typically the Batman that's on live action is usually just fighting oriented. They usually focus less on his detective skills and more on his fighting. I mean, they do try and add in some sort of detective stuff, but can you name a real good detective scene that was ever in one of these movies? Because I sure the hell can't. I mean, they're usually just discussing what kind of new weapons he has, or a new vehicle, or some type of computer or technology that he's acquired. It's never really about him doing any detective work. In fact, all of these things that he does acquire throughout the movie is typically just used to help him in battle. There's never really anything specifically made for him to gain any real knowledge on his enemies or his opponents. Anything from the DC Cinematic Universe to the Dark Knight series, I can't really put my mind on something that can prove he's a true detective. He's never really solving any crimes that weren't meant for him personally, like a robbery or some type of death that would have nothing to do with him personally, but it's just something he's a crime he has to solve. There hasn't really been one of those within the live action series, at least to what I can remember. But there's tons of that in the cartoons and the comics. It typically starts off with a crime that Batman needs to solve that has nothing to do with him personally, and it leads off to this whole chaotic thing with whoever he's up against at the time of the comic or the cartoon. Also, they tend to make Batman have a little bit too much personality. If you've known Batman throughout your life, you've known he's a very, very strict guy, even when it comes to his own kids and family. From start to finish, from the first to the last, as the years went on, his personality kinda went up and down. His moments of being in the scene went up and down. His being in the public eye went way down. From him being at an auction, buying poison ivy with a back credit card. From him being on the news and in courtrooms trying to prevent Harvey Dent from being killed or assassinated. And him being sarcastic and jokey, trying to find one-liners and comebacks for every villain's remarks towards him. And mind you, these examples go from Michael Keaton, George Clooney, and Christian Bale. I'm not really getting into Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman yet, or even just DC's portrayal of a live-action Batman. I'm not getting into that as of yet, because he's on a whole different level. But I can never understood what makes the Batmans prior to Ben Affleck so special. What makes their specific movies so memorable. I used to be in love with the Batman growing up. Every rendition of him was always either in a comic or a cartoon when I was growing up, so I didn't really have any live action ones that, in my particular time of being young, a Batman movie was made live action. I was born after the Michael Keaton and George Clooney era of Batman movies. And when I was young, all I ever had was the cartoons and the comics, which I mainly just went for the cartoons, and I loved all of them. You never see that type of Batman in any of these live-action Batman. Pretty much the story is what people are, I guess, liking so much, which I don't find those stories to be that difficult for a Batman movie. Because Batman's missions are typically hardcore when it comes to mental. And the Batman in the movies typically depend on their gadgets and stuff and word of mouth in order for him to find out who anybody is that's against him, to understand his enemy's plot. And if you don't get what I mean, take the games for examples. Those games, you have a lot of mental aspects where you have to literally think. You have to search and find, use his gadgets to find footprints and stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm talking about when I say detective work. You don't usually see Batman doing any detective work. The games are a perfect example of what proven Batman as a detective can show. If you haven't watched any of the cartoons or the movies, I'm sure a lot of people have played the video games, particularly the Dark Knight series, the ones with I guess from the PlayStation 3 and up. I've only really seen walkthroughs and stuff on YouTube when it comes to knowing anything about those games, but I tell you this, they've always put me to sleep. I've never been interested in the game further than like the beginning. Like the tutorial alone just pits me out. Maybe because I went to it thinking it would be more action-packed and less about him being a detective, since that's all I've been shown. And typically at the movie versions of superheroes and stuff, the movies tend to rely on those characteristics as the blueprint for their own superhero version or their own superhero game about that character. So any Batman games that came out, I'd usually suspect that they would be kind of like the Christian Bale Batman. And typically in those movies, it's like I said, based on action. And that's what I went into it thinking, but that's not the case. With Batman games, during the PlayStation 3 and up, it's a lot of detective work. A lot of finding clues and listening to hints and stuff like that, figuring out motives. There's more of that than there is action. There's action scattered around in boss fights, but typically, leading up to these action scenes is a lot of detective work. And that's Batman. 90% of his job is boring. The only action is when he finds out what's going on and he tries to solve the case. But 9 times out of 10, it's boring detective work. So maybe that could be a reason why they don't really implement it in his movies, because people have little attention span. But come on, it worked. It worked for Edward from Twilight. I seen his Batman movie. It was everything that was missing from any of these Hollywood-made Batman movies. It was just perfect. I don't want to go into it, but yeah, I pretty much loved that Batman live-action movie. Probably the only one I truly loved. The other ones I liked, but the one with Edward from Twilight, I fucking loved it. He did detective work. He had to find clues and solve riddles, and he wasn't just focused on himself. He actually helped people around the city and stop crimes and stuff, leading up to his own personal crime. Well, not crime, his own personal I said crime. His own personal case to solve. So yeah, if you haven't seen the Robert Pattinson Batman movie, you really need to go check it out. It's not what it seems. He's not Robert Pattinson in that movie. He is completely Bruce Wayne as a young adult. And I believe every second of it. I believe every punch he gives. I believe every crime he solves. I believe every investigation he finishes. I believe all of it. It's just a completely realistic rendition of Batman himself, as you would see in comics. So give that movie a look. It's pretty good. I promise you, you will not be let down. Read. With that being said, I find it very difficult to believe that it was just boring, that They're like, oh, nobody has the attention span to watch Batman be a detective. Let's just sprinkle some bits and pieces here of him trying to figure something out, and the rest of it, let's focus on the story. Let's focus on him being a ninja and all the ninja techniques he's learned throughout his years as an assassin. The movies tend to focus on things that make Batman a great fighter, but not a great thinker, not a great problem solver. Batman typically has two people helping him solve a case: Detective Gordon and Alfred. That's it. Everything else is behind the scenes. I'm pretty sure he had multiple people helping Batman in all the live-action movies, except for the Robert Pattinson one. Even though he had a couple more than just Alfred and Gordon helping him, it wasn't too out of the way. I want people to tell me what makes these live-action Batman. I need to know, because it don't matter how many times I rewatch him, I don't feel like I solved any cases. You could watch an episode of Law and Order and you felt like you solved the case with them. Not too much was black and white. You figured things out as the show went along. Not only that, that's all there is case solving. And it's been going on for years. Different Law and Orders, different seasons. How many seasons? How long has this thing been on? I think it's been on longer than Friends. And it's very popular. Almost everybody probably around the world, not just the USA, knows about Law and Order. There's been tons of detective movies that keep people engaged for the whole ride. You can't possibly tell me that Batman doing detective work won't be engaging. You can't tell me you can't find a writer to write a good unsolved mystery for Batman to solve at the beginning of his movies that leads you into his mindset, hits his trains of thought, how he gets things done before they just jump you into his fighting or his childhood and him losing his parents. His parents dying has been used as a clutch to open a Batman movie for almost all of them. Except for the Robert Pattinson one. And I can admit, probably not the George Clooney and Michael Keaton. I don't know if they went into that during those movies. But back then, those movies were more for kids. Wasn't really something adults were getting into. So I'm pretty much going to discuss the versions that came after those. Those movies used the Batman's parents' death as a clutch for an opener for pretty much all of them. And they never make it too interesting. It's always just, this happened, and that's it. They never make it seem like since it started off with his death, it should be leading into him finding something out about it. But they never go with that. It's just an opener. Batman's parents died. Bats. He was scared of bats. Movie. Now, when it comes to Ben Affleck, I just can't bother. I don't like him, not even a little bit. Nothing about him is cool. None of his movies ever made an impact on me. I never left a Ben Affleck Batman movie and was like, I want to be like him. Not a single time. It's just way too much to explain on why he's such a horrible Batman. There's just too much negativity in it. Just thinking about him, Ben Affleck being Batman, haven't y'all learned y'all lesson? He's just incapable of being a superhero. He's just not capable of getting into character in that sort of way. I can admit his Daredevil, not Daredevil himself, was a good Daredevil, but the movie, if it was a superhero movie, would have been good. If you didn't call his hero Daredevil, it would have been a good superhero movie. Just some blind guy who goes out and stops crime. And he isn't Daredevil from DC. I mean, from Marvel. It would have been a good movie because of all the stuff in it before all of these parents started getting mad about the rating system and rated R superhero movies and all that stuff, and it was more leaning into kids. That Daredevil wasn't in that era, so there was some pretty good stuff in that movie that impacted me. But there's no leeway when it comes to Batman as Ben Affleck. I mean, Ben Affleck as Batman, there's nothing at all that can redeem him. Everybody else, and maybe the Flash too, which is why I wonder why they're so connected in the movies. They're both horrible as heroes. But everyone else, I'm pretty okay with their redeemable qualities about them as their role as that particular hero. I can kind of see it. But yeah, Ben Affleck, this is a no-go for me. Me, as I stated, that man's not a detective in the movies. He's not anything but an action hero in a bat suit with money. If you also want to go more into detail on how it's not, you can take the third Iron Man movie as an example as well. Tony lost everything and he's in the middle of nowhere with nothing, and he solves a case on who he's up against with his brain, with hints and clues and all of that stuff. He was doing true Batman detective work. And guess what? Everybody loved it. It wasn't in the way. It wasn't boring. It didn't put anybody to sleep. Those were some of the best moments in the Iron Man 3 movie. Was him without any of his technology, solving the case, investigating, doing detective work, all alone. That was some of the best parts in the movie. So it's not because it's boring. It's not because nobody's gonna watch it or nobody wants to see it. It's just lazy. Not having Batman be a detective is just lazy. I would be completely fine with a whole movie of Batman investigating, and at the end, he beats up the criminal. He beats the boss. I would be completely fine with that. No action at all until the last end of the movie. I'd be completely fine with that. Cause it's Batman. I want to see this dude solving crimes, using his brain, being the Dark Knight everybody's afraid of. Not cause he's just gonna kick your ass, but he will find you. How he found you? Bro, he will find you. No matter who you is, where you at, he will find you. But in the movies, nobody knows why. Nobody can explain it. He had a gadget. Somebody told him this. And you're found. Crime solved. Anyway, I guess that's about it for now. And I'll see you.